Thank you, Colleen. Good morning, everyone. I'm Amy Shaw with the Greater Binghamton Chamber, and welcome to our 7th and final session of our Inside the C-Suite. Today we're covering Habit 7, Sharpen the Saw, kind of the culmination of all of the habits that we've covered. So I want to first introduce the CEOs who are joining us today and have them give you a brief background. So I'm pleased to welcome Mike Field, the President and Chief Executive Officer at the Raymond Corporation, and Steve Triska, Vice President and General Manager of the Power and Propulsion Solutions at BAE Systems. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Good morning, Amy. How are you?
Very good. Mike, can you give us some background just about yourself, how you got into the role that you did today?
Sure thing. So I was born and raised kind of just up the road in Lafayette, New York, just south of Syracuse. I grew up on an apple farm. Kind of the same time that I learned to ride a bike, I learned to use material handling and move around pallets of apples and that sort of stuff. I ended up going on to engineering school at RIT. I worked for Carrier for about 10 years. Then I went into some graduate work at Boston University. Ended up working for an automation company in Boston for about 10 years in semiconductor automated material handling. Sold that company and started a couple of startups along the way, and then ended up back here surreptitiously at Raymond. And I've been here since 2004, moved through the organization. I started in engineering and ended up as CEO now. So I love what I do, and Raymond's been here almost 100 years at this point. So it's a great
Yes, they have. That's amazing. Steve.
Very different path in a lot of ways. I grew up in Connecticut. I majored in double major in English and mathematics in college, so it's a pretty good indicator that I had no idea what I wanted to do with myself. So I just moved on to just embracing that theme. Within a 2-year period, I had joined the Marine Corps and gone to law school. So I still didn't know what to do with myself at some point, but joined the Marine Corps, got through law school, and was a judge advocate in the Marine Corps for about 4 years on active duty, and then got out and went in-house as in a legal capacity with a company in Washington, D.C. That was a government contractor, and spent about 5 years there. Went over to be general counsel of a smaller company in Washington, D.C., a research company. Spent another 6 years there. And then came out here in 2004 and was a sector general counsel for BAE Systems until 2010, when we took two what were at the time failing businesses and kind of slammed them together and made our last ditch go at it. And that's the business where we have a military and commercial power and propulsion business here. So I've been working here in that capacity ever since 2010, and moved to the area in 2004. Absolutely love it out here.
So you guys both joined our community the same year. That's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Steve, I want to thank you for your service to our country. Thank you so much. I'm going to move on to introducing our facilitator, Mary Surdy. Mary M. Surdy is a dedicated award-winning leadership consultant with 40 plus years of experience in administrative, educational, and business expertise. She specializes in human capitalization, strategic planning, staff development, teaching and learning, and personnel and project management. Mary has served in administration in multiple school districts and as a mentor, coach, teacher at all levels K through 12, and a college instructor. Locally, she serves on several nonprofit boards and is an active member of Binghamton Rotary. Nationally, Mary's been a consultant and trainer for Franklin Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People since 2002, and she's a graduate of the Chamber's Leadership Program, BLI. Mary, I'm going to turn the program over to you.
Great. Good morning, and thank you, Amy. Welcome to Mike and Steve and all of our virtual participants this morning. We are excited to be offering this last of 7 conversations with our local CEOs around the impact of the 7 habits of highly effective people. We're interested this morning to hear what impact the 7 habits has had on their professional teams, their organizations, as well as their personal lives. I'm going to be providing an overview of habit 7, Sharpen the Saw. And I'm going to engage with Mike and Steve to share your experiences and your wisdom. And today's participants will also have the opportunity to interact, ask questions by typing in the chat or one's hand. And Amy does a great job monitoring that. So thanks, Amy.
Sure.
So we're going to start this morning, just recap slide number 1. For those of you who are new to our series centering around the 7 habits of highly effective people, the book was written by Stephen Covey in 1989, but it continues to be one of the 25 most influential business management books. Covey's premise is that character and principles are crucial for effective living and for great leadership. Slide number 2 depicts an hourglass. And this hourglass shows how the 7 habits fit together. Habits 1, 2, and 3 are at the bottom of the hourglass. These habits we discussed this spring, they center around self-mastery, inner strength, character based on timeless principles, a purposeful life, and values shown in how we manage our time. During June, July, and August, we moved to the public victory, habits 4, 5, and 6, about building effective relationships through win-win thinking, seeking first to understand, then be understood, and habit 6, synergizing. And importantly today, the circle that surrounds this hourglass, habit 7, sharpen the saw, it's pretty much the habit that makes all the other habits possible through self-renewal. So to Mike and Steve, I'm gonna pull you in right away here. And could you tell us, give us a couple principles, those timeless, endless truths that are at the core of your leadership, that are reflected in your interactions and in your decisions in your organizations. Covey argues that it's core principles and character that are at the foundation for being highly effective as a leader.
Mary, we lost your audio for some reason.
It looks
There
like
you go.
Oh, we're back. Okay. The internet has been a little bit unstable this week, I've noticed. So if we have some technical difficulties, we'll all hang in there with each other.
That's right.
Mike, how about some timeless principles that are at the core of your team, your organization, your personal life? Would you like to share with us?
Sure thing. So I guess on a personal level, it may sound a little odd, but I start every day by making my bed. So it's like one of those very simple things. There's an accomplishment. You've started the day, you got something done, you move on to the next thing. You know, on the company level, we've been around for 100 years. We have a lot of history. We've done a lot of things. We're part of Toyota Industries. So we also have all the Toyota precepts and the methods and values that are part of that. But we've chosen to take that kind of a step further and create what we call our Raymond recipe, which helps us, you know, kind of guide what we do every day. And rather than having them stated as values, we kind of state them as questions. And there's 5 of them. It's real quick. I'll just go through those 5. From an ethics standpoint, do we have the courage to do the right thing and demand the same of others? Innovation. Are we constantly looking to find a better solution? Customer first. Is what we're doing meeting or exceeding our customer expectations? Compassion. And this is really important right now. Compassion. Are we treating others how we'd like to be treated? And are we being fair and supportive of team members? And then finally, you have to have that closure point of drive for results. Are we proud of our work product? and would others feel the same? So we try to use those questions every day as we go about our business and go through the challenges of leadership, especially during these past 2 years of COVID and the challenges that have been part of that. So it's really helped us with that.
Thanks, Mike. That Raymond recipe really gets at some of those core principles and values that Stephen Covey has emulated in his book. So thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
Stephen, how about, would you like to share with us some of those principles that surround your work and your personal life?
Yeah, and from the personal standpoint, I wish I was as good about making my bed as Mike is. So despite my Marine Corps training, that seems to have fallen by the wayside. Personally, honestly, it really is around the golden rule. I mean, it really is in every interaction I have, whether it's a personal or professional interaction. How do I want to be treated? And then, how do I expect to be treated? And then I want to treat other people the same way. So it's just a timeless, perfect kind of way to live your life, in my opinion. And in fact, it's amazing how often it really works in a professional environment as well, especially when you're, seeking to understand what other people are saying without judgment. We've got a whole set of, what kind of our core principles. Unfortunately for us, we have a lot more of them than Mike has, and it goes around, vision, creativity, adaptability, collaboration, people development, integrity, courage, and inspiration. So I won't go into all those things, but we've certainly got a set of precepts that we expect folks in the company to live by. I know if I circle back from a personal standpoint, one of the things that I learned in the Marine Corps was what we call servant leadership, and that's where the role that I'm in, I consider myself to be an enabler. I bring resources, and the resources can be money, people, and bring a strategy to bear, and then enable and empower people to go ahead and execute those things, and then make sure that they have the tools and the resources necessary to be successful. And so I view myself as just really trying to enable everyone else to do their job in a way that's the most efficient way, and in a way that gives them the most authority and the most adaptability in their roles.
Thank you. Both of you pretty much summed up the other 6 habits and some of those. Thank you. I'm going to move on this morning Amy, if you'd show slide number 3. So habit 7 is sharpen the saw. And the analogy behind habit 7 means taking the time to sharpen the saw before you cut down a tree. It's that daily process of renewal. It's preserving and enhancing the greatest asset that you have, you. It's taking the time to invest in ourselves to continuously improve in order to be highly effective. So I'm going to go back to Steve and to Mike. And can you tell us, first of all, you've shared a little bit about vision and mission of your organizations. I guess I want to go another level deeper and ask, do you have a strategic plan? And how does that plan provide for that continuous renewal, the continuous improvement in your organization? And not only for your organization, but also for your employees. Let's go to Steve first on this one.
Yeah, and just like Mike, as part of a big company, we've got kind of vision statements that roll through the whole company, that from the corporate level, our sector level, our business area level. So we have a pretty specific vision statement. We have a very specific mission that we've detailed for ourselves, and then we have a strategy. We update our strategy twice a year. We look at a 5-year window, generally speaking. So for me, the key part of this is how stable is that strategy? I like to look at it in periods of almost 2 to 3 year periods. And we're trying to lock down a simple, executable vision for what we're trying to achieve as a business. And if we were to change that every year, every 6 months, I feel like that would drive a lot of instability and confusion around the business. So what we try to do is be as consistent and stable as possible, as simple in our messaging as possible, to allow people to execute that. I think I'm going to steal an idea from Mike that we had talked about earlier, but it does resonate with me. One of the keys is how it's not simple, but how easily understandable is the message that we're delivering, so that everybody feels like what they're doing in their daily job is contributing to the success of the organization.
Thanks, Steve. Mike, what would you like to add?
So as Steve mentioned, we also have kind of a 5-year cadence to our strategic planning, and it's a formal written document. I have this kind of credo that I espouse from time to time, that if we can't write it down, it's probably really hard to do it. So we take the time to physically write it down every 5 years. On an annual basis, we create an annual operating plan, which are kind of the tactics that we're going to employ that year to move towards those 5-year goals that we have. Of course, we have a very formalized vision and mission statement that ties into focusing on our customers. It's built around, our 100-year history of innovation, quality, and service is kind of the pillars of who we are and what we do. So we create those annual plans. We call it our AOP, annual operating plan. And from that, everybody creates group objectives. The managers create their group objectives, and then those roll down progressively and elaborate against those vision and mission statements and objectives, right down to individual objectives. So we try to give some form of a clear line of sight of what the individual is doing every day to improve the organization, to improve themselves, and how that connects back to that mission and vision statement that is very customer focused. So as Steve said, it's all about getting everybody focused in the same way. We have monthly reviews of that annual operating plan. We have quarterly communication meetings where everybody gets to hear the same set of information, both financial as well as operational challenges and other things that we're trying to accomplish.
Thanks, Mike. I'm going to have a follow-up question here. I can see that both of your organizations have that strategic plan that filters through simple messaging, both of you talked about, down to the individual employee, so that the organization continually improves and grows. So at the employee level, how do you help your individual team members renew personally, and so that it benefits the company? Are there wellness programs that are part of each of your organizations? If you could share a little bit about that, I think our audience really would be interested. I'll go first back to Mike. Mike, what is it at the individual level for employees that would help them personally renew, that would benefit the organization?
Yeah, so we have a very formalized wellness program. Our executive vice president of HR, Steve Van Ostrand, started this about 10 years ago, working very hard at it. And it's multifaceted. It helps people both physically and mentally improve. We also really promote being involved in charities and supporting the community. We have over 140 different charities that we're involved in. And quite honestly, it ends up being many of the employees that are driving it. So they'll come up with an idea for a cancer walk or something like that, and they will go around and support it. And we support them in doing that. So it's really about finding that balance. It's about community, and it's about making sure that people are healthy and aware of their health and how that can help them both in their job, but their families as well as the organization.
Great, thanks, Mike. Steve, what would you like to add about BAE?
In the aspects that Mike mentioned, I think we're really doing many of the same things. We have wellness committees. That are we have groups that get together, hiking groups and yoga groups and biking groups and things like that. And we really encourage those things. The additional thing that I'd mention is that the company has in place some wellness incentives, financial incentives, where you can set personal health goals, work with a health coach through our Cigna provider. And if you can meet those goals or progress through the plan that you put together with your coach, then there are financial incentives that are put into a health spending account that you can apply to your health expenses. So, we're really trying to drive it through and have a financial aspect to it as well.
Great. Thank you both for sharing that. Amy, we're going to move to slide number 4. And this investing in your best asset, you really is about renewing in 4 different dimensions. And Steve and Mike have really already touched on several of these. It's the 4 dimensions of an individual's nature: physical, mental, spiritual, and social emotional. The physical dimension involves caring effectively for your physical body, eating the right kinds of food, getting sufficient rest and relaxation, and exercising on a regular basis. Mental, the mind grows stronger when we challenge it. Mental stimulation makes us more alert, responsive, creative, and better able to solve problems and meet challenges. And you can see on the slide that I've listed just a few of the possible activities that we want people to engage in these first 2 dimensions. For example, stress management. Both of our CEOs this morning have already talked about wellness that is part of their organization. Certainly mental, continued professional growth, taking a course, having a hobby, investing in art and music. The next slide shows the last 2 dimensions, spiritual. The spiritual dimensions is about our source of meaning and purpose. Spiritual activities uplift and inspire us. They help us discover and understand our mission, our purpose, and they help clarify our values. Social emotional really is a renewal that's centered around our relationships with other people and enhancing those that we currently have and seeking new social interactions. So both Stephen and Mike talked about that the social, emotional, and community investment is driven by the employees in both of their organizations, and I would commend that. It certainly helps people renew when you can give to others. So to Stephen, to Mike, this all sounds good. Now I want to know, what are some obstacles that you personally face in implementing renewal activities in your busy lives as CEOs of these corporations? Steve, how about you first? Any obstacles?
Yeah, I think the biggest obstacle that I face is turning my mind off more than anything else. As I look through those 4 dimensions, they're all incredibly important to me, and I spend a lot of time, as much time as I possibly can, doing things in the outdoors and outdoor activity. But and I also pay pretty close attention to the amount of sleep I'm getting. But I find that sometimes my ability to either enjoy those things or accomplish the sleep goals are impaired by my mind and trying to turn my mind off. And I think that's the thing that I struggle with the most, which is, there's a gnawing problem that has to be dealt with, or something, an issue that came up during the day, trying to get that shut down for a little bit. And like anybody else, it's oftentimes, if I can engage in an activity and try to use that activity as a way to shut my mind down, often, a half hour into it, an hour into it, I'll start to have ideas about how to attack the problem that I wouldn't think of just by trying to, think hard and grind it out. So I think carrying around the problem is one of the hardest things that I struggle with, trying to release that and get some away time mentally.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That ability to be present even when we're renewing. As you said, our minds are just go, so complex. And thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. Mike, how about you? What are some obstacles you face in really implementing renewal activities personally?
Well, probably similar to Steve. It's the number of hours in the day. It seems there's never enough, and there's always more challenges than we have time for. But we have to make time. So, I personally employ, and it's what we employ here at Raymond as well, is this kind of continuous improvement thought process. So, try and save a little energy every day to improve what you're doing so that tomorrow is better. And if you just have that mindset all the time, you figure out ways to get things done. You figure out ways to solve the problems. Getting to root cause of challenges in and of itself just gives you that satisfaction and closure to understand what is really causing the problem that you're facing, and how do we get to fixing it. And that works for me, whether it's, it's personal or it's work related. So, just continuously never giving up, working at it. As Steve said, the time to shut down and have your mind relax. I try to get outside as well. I try to exercise every day to some level. Sometimes at lunchtime, you'll see me here in Green, especially when it's nice and warm. I'll be out walking at lunch. I may have my phone with me, but I'll be out walking and trying not to look at it and trying not to talk, but just kind of clear my head.
Great, thank you. That's wonderful modeling for your employees, that importance of that. A 10-minute walk that's investing in yourself, and you go back and can tackle a problem freshly. So thank you for sharing, Mike.
Mary,
So-
I'd like to just interrupt before we move on to the next slide. Catherine has a question in the chat. So Catherine, if you want to unmute yourself and just ask Mike directly, that'd be great.
Sure, thank you. So Mike, I love what you said about the saving some energy to figure out, improvements. And one of the challenges that I face, I'm a manager, and I have people that come up with ideas, and they have great ideas to change things, but to make that change, it would take time, and almost like you would need to hold time, not let time go, because they would miss current schedules of the project that they're doing, because it might be some big software change or a big way of changing a procedure or a whole process. And so how do you balance that? When do you make that decision to say, okay, we'll invest the time now and maybe miss a few schedules or miss some customer commitments? How do you balance that?
So probably there is no perfect answer to that question, as you clearly realized. It really comes down to, as I mentioned, what we employ is a methodology to get to root cause. And if you can figure out what it is that's causing the problem, then you can make decisions as to whether let's stop right now and fix this before we can actually move forward, so that we have a new foundation to build from. The other thing that we employ as part of a lean organization and applying TPS or Toyota Production System methods is that we have a formal method for continuous improvement and gathering those ideas. And we think that just adds so much value to the interaction of the associates as they go about their day, because they feel like they're part of improving. And we log those items, and then we have a team that just is dedicated to helping continuously improve the organization. So, that methodology really rings clear and strong with the organization. In our plant, actually, here in Green, we have more than 1,200 people working there. We've completed over 90,000 Kaizens, or continuous improvement ideas, in less than 10 years. And all of those have been implemented. So it's all about the, how do you, as I mentioned, kind of how do you save some energy to fix the little things that just drag you down every day, so that tomorrow is better than today. So there's no perfect answer. You have to figure out how big of a deal the exact problem is, and as I said, using that kind of root cause rather than just saying this is a symptom. What's the real root cause? Then you can figure out just how much of your energy to put towards fixing it and the timing of it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Mike, it feels like there's a formal structure in your organization for that innovation, and it comes from the employees themselves, and a team takes a look at these suggestions for improvements and innovation, and you have buy-in from employees through that process that's established. Steve, any thoughts that you want to add to that about, that?
It just reminded me of a situation we have, but I think Catherine, from our standpoint, we constantly evaluate our priorities. And when we talk about fixing a big problem, it takes time, it takes money. And so we even have to balance that against our internal investment projects and in development projects, because some of the same people might be working on one or the other. So really on almost a monthly basis, we're reevaluating our priorities, making sure that, our resources, and that's our time, our money, our people, are being allocated to the things that are most important in the organization. Your question reminded me of something I was dealing with on Monday, which is, we're running late on a development program. We have commitments to 4 different customers, and how do we prioritize which customer comes first, which one comes second, which one comes third, and everybody's getting them late, but it's a question of how late. So and it's a really kind of grueling process, but you just have to that's part of the things that certainly Mike and I have to deal with on a regular basis. Make that hard decision and accept the consequences of it. And just try to work through it in a way that is, and in some of those situations, it's not win-win. You're going to have unhappy folks, but it's just a question of degree. So you have to make some of those kind of hard decisions on a regular basis. But again, we come back and just kind of always reevaluate our priorities and making sure we're addressing the most pressing needs of the business.
Thank you. We have both, similar to what you both said, we do the formal retrospectives and improvements, and we have systems to do that, to log them, to make sure we don't make the same mistakes next time, or hopefully don't, and agile and saying which is the top priority. It just, I wish I had a magic way to just push the stop button on time and take those great ideas and make those employees feel like they have taken the time to think of something good, but they're also the same people that have to hurry up and get to the next, to the next person. So, yep. So we'll keep looking for the magic bullet. And it's nice to hear it from your level.
I think, culturally, our expectation is things have to happen really fast now. And in fact, a lot of these things you can handle a year from now. If you really think about it and step back, we just expect everything to be done fast. We're just inundated with data all the time and information all the time. And it makes you feel like everything has to be done now. And it's amazing. Yep. Even if you think back to 20 years ago or 30 years ago, when, 30 years ago, faxes had just started, but before that, we were mailing things to each other. And there was an inherent time lag in all those things, and nothing was broken, everything was worked, everything was fine. So
good point.
The expectations we create ourselves are part of the problem.
Yeah, I guess the only thing that I'd reiterate is that you really have to work hard at getting to what is that root cause problem, because it's really easy to just try and fix a symptom or put a Band-Aid on the symptom. And, as much as we would all like to say there's a magic wand or a silver bullet, there just isn't. So, we got to get to, what is the real problem, and what's the problem behind the problem? We use the kind of 5 why method to get really down to what's the real issue here. And oftentimes you find that it's a very, very basic thing that you're doing wrong, or that you're not optimizing on, that you really can fix. And sometimes it takes an awful long time to get it fixed. So to Steve's point, this immediate satisfaction that we're into at this point, immediate gratification just isn't possible. So you just got to be disciplined enough to say, am I really fixing the root cause problem, rather than putting a Band-Aid on something that is only going to get worse.
Thank you very much, both of you.
And thanks, Catherine, for your question. I'm going to ask Amy to put up slide number 6, and you can see the 4 dimensions there. And balanced renewals, really, it's a lifetime journey. And is both of you just articulated that time is an ally. So renewal, it's a principle and it's a process, and it allows us to grow, to change, and continually improve. The things that you do to sharpen the saw in one dimension have a positive impact in other dimensions because they're highly interrelated. Your physical health affects your mental health, Your spiritual strength affects your social emotional strength. As you improve in one of these 4 dimensions, you increase your ability in the other dimensions as well. So to Steve and Mike, both of you already mentioned the physical dimension. Mike mentioned walking, and Steve has mentioned being out in nature and enjoying the outdoors. Would you each like to just share maybe some renewal you do in one of the other 3 dimensions? And then I'm going to switch the question to, how has this pandemic that we're still involved in affect that work-life balance of your employees? And what adjustments have you had to make for your employees during the pandemic? So let's go, I'll go to Mike. Mike, would you like to share any other renewal you do in other areas? And then we'll go to Steve, and then we'll talk about what has the pandemic done to this work-life balance. Mike?
Yeah, so I think probably one of the biggest challenges we have, since the pandemic, and maybe even a bit before that, with the continual growth of online communication, is that social piece. How do we take the time to get to know people? How do we take the time to do the right thing, to understand people's situation, to have that empathy for it? So that's a really hard one. Steve and I were talking, and one of the things is the management by walking around, and I'm sure he's going to talk about that more. I'm lucky enough to be able to do that to a degree still in the factory here, because with the pandemic, at least, we had the situation where we had to reduce the number of people in the building by 50%. At the same time, we're an essential business. So that means basically that everybody needs to be in the factory that is producing product, and everybody that was in an office type position had to work from home. And, that threw everything up in the air. So, you can't overemphasize the need to communicate, to have, real discussions with people, whether it's a venue of this type, communicating with Teams or Zoom, having those touch points every day with your teams and your individuals that you would have had normally just by walking around and, coffee conversation or whatever, lunch conversation, whatever you want to call it. We really have to focus on not allowing people to feel isolated. And to get out those challenges and emotions, because everybody's afraid. Nobody quite knows what is really going on. Lots of uncertainty. So the more that we can communicate, the more that we can engage each other, I think the healthier we all are.
Thanks, Mike. Steve, I'll go to you.
Yeah, and I'll echo Mike. We're a little bit different balance. We're about 50-50 between manufacturing and say engineering, and then operation, background operations like finance and contracts. But throughout the whole pandemic, we've had people in the plant continuing to manufacture. So we've had to figure out how to get social distancing in place, how to get proper masking in place. But the engagement has been easier because all those folks who are used to working together generally have been working together. We were in pretty good shape from a density standpoint because we're pretty well spread out in manufacturing. But I think the difficulty has been finding ways to engage the rest of the employees who have generally been home. And I wish I could say we had a really good answer to that, and we don't. We're using these tools, these virtual tools, which personally, I don't find any nearly as effective as personal interaction. I know from my standpoint, as Mike mentioned, just taking time on a regular basis to walk around the building and stop and talk to people, and not even talk to people in a way about, have you done this today? Have you done that today? More around, how are you? What do you need to do your job? How are things? How's your family? That's a really important part of the job to me, and I can do that out in the manufacturing area, but from all the other areas, like the area I'm sitting in, it's virtually empty here as we talk about it today. So we've struggled with this idea about what does the workplace look like even post-pandemic. How do we bring some of these workers back in on a hybrid basis? How much free time do we continue to give them? About half of the people who have been home want to continue to work from home as much as possible. About the other half want to get back to the plant as quickly as possible. And then on top of that, we also manage a facility in Rochester, England, and we have the same issues there. And so we're trying to, we have enough problems even trying to build cohesiveness between Endicott, New York, and Rochester, UK, but this has exacerbated that in a big way. So we don't have an answer. I think just like everyone else, we're still trying to figure this out, but also not only provide employees with a work environment that they're happy in and they feel like they can thrive in, but also make sure that we are holding on to a common culture inside the company and getting things done that the company needs to get done, and balancing those two things.
Yeah, thanks to both of you for sharing those challenges. I think that's the biggest dimension right now that so many of us are struggling with, that social emotional. How do we keep those connections given this pandemic and all the rules, the density rules, the masking rules, and we benefit when we can all share ideas. That's all I can say to you. So I appreciate both of you sharing with us this morning. I'm going to move to a new thought here, a new idea, and we'll try and connect it with habit 7, sharpen the saw. So much of Covey's 7 habits have again been recently validated in a New York Times bestseller. And the name of this book is called The Blue Zone Solution, where the author Dan Buettner identifies 5 regions of the world where people live longer, happier, and healthier lives, happier than average lives. And these 5 regions have the greatest number of centenarians, those people who live to be over 100 years old. They include Okinawa, Japan is one, Sardinia, Italy, Costa Rica, Icaria, Greece, and Loma Linda, California. And so in his book, Dan explores, what do those 5 regions in the world have in common? And on this slide, I've kind of listed the 9 takeaways covering the lifestyles of the people in those regions. People in those regions move naturally. They engage in moderate, regular physical activity. It might be gardening, it might be farming, but they move naturally throughout the day. They have life purpose just beyond work. They have the ability to downshift and some stress reduction techniques and routines. They have an 80% rule. Only eat till you feel you're 80% full. So they have moderate caloric intake. Another point in common is that there's a plant slant, that they have mostly a plant-based diet in those 5 regions of the world. Wine at 5, it's moderate alcohol intake, and 4 out of those 5 regions had a little bit of red wine once or twice a day. Community, those 5 regions had engagement in some kind of spirituality or religion. The next one was loved ones first, that a priority, or put first things first, as Stephen says, was engagement in family life. And finally, the last one was right tribe, meaning in these 5 regions of the world, people tended to have a social circle of about 5 friends that were with them through life, through those good times and bad times. And those 5 friends, that social circle, supported healthy behaviors. We can see all of the habits in this list, from habit 1 being proactive, beginning with the end of mind, leaving a legacy, putting first things first, identifying priorities like family and community, to those interdependent, mutually beneficial relationships that are required in habits 4, 5, and 6. And then you can see habit 7, sharpen the saw, throughout all of these. So anyone out there, do you know of the Blue Zone Solution? And have you read it? And is there anything you'd like to share with us, Mike and Steve? I would say that I'll throw it back to Mike and Steve. Blue Zone Solution. What are your thoughts?
It sounds like a wonderful place to be. There's always challenges in finding those types of places. You have to deal with that though. If you lose yourself in the moment of work or whatever it is that you're doing so completely that you forget to almost breathe, that's the problem. And you have to work at it, and you have to have ways to cope with that, and whether it's family or spiritual or something else that can help give you a little bit of a tap on the shoulder to say, hey, are you thinking about what you're doing here? You're not paying enough attention to someone else or something else as you should, because you're so focused on whatever that current very immediate task is that's brought on by the immediacy of the devices we have. So.
Steve, thoughts? Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, I was just thinking if one glass of wine is good, two has to be better. It's just it's no, I think fundamentally, if my view is, if anybody's out there on a regular basis, day after day after day, and we're not going through some kind of a significant problem, but they're day after day working 60 hours a week, then there's a problem with the way the job is set up, and the way we're executing the work, and there's a problem with our resources. I am not a strong adherent to being the first one in and the last one out, and putting on that kind of show. It should be a regular cadence of a work week. We will go through highs and lows in work, and sometimes we all have to put in a little bit extra effort, and other times maybe we can take a breather and have a little flex of the schedule. And I try to approach that by having a lot of outdoor, or excuse me, a lot of outside kind of pursuits and activities, and it does cut across just doing a lot of things outdoor. And I unfortunately, for my body, I tend to do a lot of things that are kind of dumb and extreme, that I pay for, but I can't stop myself from doing those things. But even little things every day. I do the New York Times crossword puzzle every day before I come into work. I get the paper, hard paper at home, delivered at home. I do the crossword puzzle. I read a lot of books, a lot of fiction. I listen to a ton of music. I'm a big jazz fan. I've got a picture of Thelonious Monk on my hutch behind me, which has been there for many, many years, because he's an idol to me. And I try to do as much in the community as I can possibly do. So, I'm on 4 different boards locally for community service. So I always feel like if I can do those things, and I can, I owe it to those things, and owe it to myself to put time aside for those things. And so those almost force me to get out of the office sometimes, or try to forget about a problem that's going on in the office. And I need that to renew and recharge. I need to be able to have those other interests and pursue those other interests, with vigor, in order to balance off what goes on in the daily work life.
Great. Thanks, Steve. And I will just add to that, the Blue Zone solution, Dan goes a step further. And what they're trying to do is replicate some of these 9 characteristics and communities throughout the United States. For example, working with environmental planning committees. How do we get green space for people to engage in physical activity? So it's not just a book about identifying, it's about how can we make this better in our own country here in the United States. So I recommend it. There's also a cookbook that goes with it called the Blue Zone Solution Cookbook. My last slide this morning, Amy, has some tips on it for renewal. And it says start small, choose a dimension that you've neglected or that needs work. For example, if you haven't been able to get that recharge physically, start there. And add the activity to your calendar. 80% greater chance it will happen if you write it down. So set aside that time for exercise, put it in your calendar, 80% greater chance it will happen. And like I said, start small. Instead of, if you can't get out for a walk, take the stairs instead of the elevator. Grab a partner or a buddy is appropriate for any of these 4 dimensions. And absolutely celebrate your successes. I love to check things off in my calendar when I've actually committed to it and followed through and done it. So that check off is my way of celebrating. I'm going to go to Steve and Mike, and I'm going to ask both of you, Would you talk to us a little bit about maybe an experience you've had when you've been too busy cutting down the tree and didn't take time to sharpen the saw? A time when you put yourself last and that efficiency, effectiveness, and quality dwindled? And would you be willing to share with us what were some of the effects on you, on your family, on your team, and in your own health when you didn't take time to sharpen the saw? Mike, do you have an example you could describe for us?
Sure thing. So I mentioned earlier, when I kind of went through my history, that I went back to school when I was 30. So I went back to school for a double master's. As part of that process, I actually went and lived in Japan for 6 months, did 24 credit hours in 6 months as part of a program that Boston University had. Basically did that and then came directly back, went to school, doing a master's in manufacturing engineering and an MBA in international operations. So I was just on the treadmill. I was driven. I was going to get this done fast. I did those dual masters. I completed them in 18 months. And along the way, I was working really hard at obviously school, but I was also running and doing all those sort of things. Well, kind of winter came around and I wasn't able to run as much because it was cold. And I'm working on my thesis and I'm doing all these things. And all of a sudden I started to not feel well and I couldn't figure out what it was. And I went to the doctor and lo and behold, somehow I had contracted shingles. And I'm like, I'm 31 years old. How is this possible that I have the shingles? And so I went to the doctor and he went through the whole thing and it was painful. And he said straight out, this is nothing but stress. You just have kind of driven yourself right down. You're so fixated and so driven to get this done that you just created this stress level in your body, and when that happens, your body kind of weakens, and shingles is just an adult version of the chicken pox that you had when you were a kid, and it comes out again. So it was kind of one of those great life lessons that yes, you can be really driven. Yes, many things have to get done. At the same time, you have to have some balance, and there are ramifications if you don't. And since then, I've tried to step back, tried to be aware, self-aware of the challenges that you can create for yourself with the stress levels that are born of what you do and the choices you make.
Wow, thanks for sharing, Micah. I'm sure many of the people in the audience can relate to that, how it can actually get to the point where it affects our health and our well-being. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Steve, question to you. Were you a time maybe when you were too busy cutting down the tree and didn't take time to sharpen that saw?
Yeah, it echoes Mike's story very, very closely. In fact, and in fact, it's the what happened is the reason why I'm in upstate New York right now. In the late '90s, I was general counsel for a company that was going through a leveraged buyout that involved a third-party trustee and employee savings money and an employee stock ownership plan, and it was registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission, and it was a very, very high stress kind of transaction. It went on for 2 years, and the work environment that I was in at the company became very toxic. It was very high stress, day to day. I was spending weeks on end working till midnight and past midnight trying to get the transaction done. And I was under so much stress that I ended up at 38, 39 years old, being on a heart monitor, going through multiple stress tests, and ultimately ended up being hospitalized for it. So it was a huge wake-up call to me in terms of what I wanted out of my life, both personally and professionally, and what was important to me personally and professionally. And the impact, going through that process and beyond the personal health issues, it was also created a pretty lousy environment for my family, because I was either not around, or when I was around, I was not pleasant to be with. So a lot of that examination led to me, relocating out of Washington, D.C. and coming to upstate New York. And I'm not to say that we don't have daily pressures personally and professionally, here too, but I think it just putting myself in a different environment and giving myself a fresh perspective made a huge difference in my life.
Thank you for sharing that, both of you. Those were obviously very painful experiences for both of you, but they speak so nicely to that importance of balance in all four areas, and what the impact can be when that balance gets out of whack. So thank you very much for sharing those with us.
Mary,
Amy, I see it.
We do
Yeah,
have a question in the chat.
Go ahead.
Steve, did you want to unmute yourself and ask directly?
Thank you guys for sharing your time and your insights this morning. It's been great. My question, I think it's a good follow on to what you were just talking about, is we're hearing a lot about the Great Resignation, and people are retiring or just retiring early or just quitting. Are you guys seeing that in your businesses, and why or why not?
I'll say we are running short in circuit card manufacturing because so many people have opted out of the workplace, and the labor pool being what it is in this area, it's not incredibly deep. So we are struggling to make sure that we're getting well-trained people in. Some of the people that we lost were actually some of our better trained people and our better producers. And we have also seen a number of key engineers decide that if I can work remotely, I'm just going to move out and go somewhere else. And within a couple of months after they go somewhere else, they just take another job. So I think we're seeing both the opting out and the migration in some respects. And I think it's going to make it more and more difficult to ensure that we have an adequate skill mix just alone here in Endicott. And I know one of the things that we're doing, which doesn't exactly help the area, is say what other locations around the country that we have in BA Systems, and there are hundreds of them, can we leverage and create an area of capability there, that helps our business and helps keep our skill mix correct. So, I think it's, again, just like dealing with the pandemic, it's another one of these things that is an offshoot that we're struggling with on a regular basis right now, and it's definitely impairing our ability to execute.
Mike, you have anything to add?
Sure thing, Steve. Definitely, we're seeing it similar to what BAE is experiencing. We have all the same challenges. We're in the same community, so to speak. From our standpoint, we've done enough discussions with people as they're exiting or as they want to exit, to understand a little bit maybe better what it is. And there's an awful lot of pandemic fatigue, that continuous uncertainty and even fear in some cases about what's next and how is this all going to work, and are we all being communicated with honestly and directly, and it creates a lot of anger and frustration, and so one of the easiest things to do is either just say, I'm not going to work anymore. I'm not quite sure how that will work out for people long term, or I want a different job because it must be better. It's it's the kind of the grass is greener syndrome as well. And to a degree, I think we probably saw this same type of thing in the 2001 timeframe too, where people went through the big bubble and then the Lehman shock in 2010. There were challenges then where people decided, I'm going to do something different. But in the bigger scheme of things, it comes down to, as Steve mentioned, how do we continue to keep that healthy culture? How do we keep to the balance of who we need to have as part of the organization? There's an upside that it brings in new talent, it brings in new perspectives, it brings in diversity and different approaches. So I'm probably the forever optimist relative to those things, that it's not necessarily terrible. It's just different, and how do we react to different, and that's kind of what Steve and I are paid for, is reacting to different. And, you know, how do we react, and how do we find our path forward that still supports all of our people and our shareholders or stakeholders as appropriate as we go forward. So there's no right answer. It is happening. It's not like it's not happening, but you know, there are always upsides.
Thank you.
Amy, was there one last question out there? Are we good?
Nope, we're good, I believe.
Okay. I would like to thank all of our participants, especially Mike and Steve this morning. And I wish all of you a healthier, happy, a longer life, and continue to sharpen the saw. And thanks for Steve and Mike. We're glad you joined our community in 2004.
Yes.
Very glad to be here.
Yes.
And thank you all for taking the time to listen to us meander our way through this. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Everybody.
Thank you to both. And just a quick thank you in addition to Mike and Steve. I want to thank Mary for our attendees who have been with us for the 7 months or just popping in and out from month to month. Mary did a phenomenal job of facilitating the series. She actually said no to me the first time I asked her. But I'm so glad she reconsidered. Mary, you have such a gift, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. I've enjoyed the series tremendously. So stay tuned for some new programming in 2022 from the Chamber. And I hope you all have a great day.
Have a nice weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone be well.
Thank you.